room, I'm jealous for two reasons. One, you guys are not in a sari. And the second thing I think is most of you, perhaps, have been on a date, which I have not. Okay? And I'm going to be 52 this year and not planning on going on one. So this is kind of a big topic to talk about, right? And we're just a group of women. And honestly, for the first time in a talk that I'm giving, I'm not wearing my work hat. This is not about my work, my education, what needs to be done, none of those. This is me talking about one of our most fundamental relationships, our relationships with our partners, with our spouses, how you find the right man in your life, and how you lead that life together. It's intensely personal. And it took me a little bit of understanding and evolving to realize and truly the unusualness, if that's a word, of my own story, right? So before we talk about arranged marriages, it's a big topic. I'd like to break it down into three parts for today, right? First, I'd like to talk a little bit about how they work, what the process is in general, so that everybody understands how arranged marriages work. The second part of my talk will focus on my story specifically and what happened with me. And then the third part is, of course, some of the things that I learned just by being in that marriage, in my marriage. We're going to turn 26 years old in about a month, and we are very, very blessed. We have 2 daughters, and so it is a happy story in many ways. In many ways it is. So here's the lowdown on how arranged marriages really work, right? Even before we go into the process of arranged marriages, which might sound strange, alien to many of you, there are some things that I think would help set the context for all of you just to understand it better, right? So in the culture that I come from in India, and there's a lot of people on the other side of the planet, right? Most of the human population actually lives in the global south, as it's called. So in that side of the planet, when you have a son and a daughter, no kid leaves the house, right? So if they go to college, they go get their undergrad, get their masters, get their PhDs, and they go back home. And then you work and you continue to live with your parents. The daughters leave the house once they're married. The sons continue to stay. I have a brother, he's an engineer, he's a couple of years older than me. He lives with my mother. And my sister-in-law, and she works for an international bank, the Bank of America actually, and she's been working there for 30 years. She's a high-flying executive, and she lives with my mother, my father as well. My father passed away a few years ago, and my brother and their kids. So what happens is the son never moves out. The son always stays back, and he's there to take care of the aging parents. And so does the daughter-in-law. Now, some of you here, I have many friends in this audience. Thank you all. Your familiar faces are so comforting. When I just moved to Austin about 2.5 years ago. And up until that time, for the 12 years that I lived in India, before that I used to live in Michigan, I used to live in Detroit. And when I was in India, for the years that I was there, of course I lived with my mother-in-law, right? So that is the chain. The second aspect of that society is that the boy side, the groom side, has more deemed authority and power than the girl side. So in every wedding, the way that it's laid out is that the groom with his family, and with a lot of pomp and show, they come to the bride's house, they have the ceremony, and he leaves with the bride. So the bride's parents are really the host family. So you have to make sure that the groom's family is well fed, you're respectful, they're happy with the arrangements, they like the flowers and blah, 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 and it is, and they can be very fussy, very, very fussy. They can be insulting, and, but honestly, the daughter's parents or the bride's parents, they don't have a choice. The third aspect is that there is a system of dowry. And what that means is that the parents of the bride are required to give money to the groom at the time of the wedding. And that is not a small amount of money. It can include land, house, cars, stocks, and cash outright, along with a ton of gold and pure diamonds, emeralds, jewelry. And when you do that, the intention behind that was when your daughter leaves the house in ancient India, she did not have the right to inherit any of her parents' property. So as she got married and left, the idea was to give her, a portion of the wealth so that she's secure. What if her husband doesn't live as long or whatever? But as with many other systems, man is man, and they've corrupted it. And they have now, it's now a horrific system where the groom's parents demand, and if he has a PhD, or if he's a physician, or if he lives abroad, and if he's a green card holder of the United States, then they ask you literally millions. Because of all of these disadvantages of having a daughter, one, she's not going to take care of you. You got to pay for the wedding, and then you got to pay the dowry, and she's of no use. Which is why there is the concept of female infanticide. But for many years now, it is banned to know the sex of your child in that side of the earth, right? If you're pregnant, you cannot know. There's no way to find out. The doctor will lose his license if they tell you the sex of your child. Because most people, when they find out it's a girl, they want to have an abortion. They don't want a child. They don't want a girl child. So that's kind of sets the context. And this is the reality that happens on the other end of the world. Now, coming to the process of an arranged marriage. So you get this context, right? The funny thing, though, is education is right at the top. So whether it's a girl or a boy, everybody needs to get a college degree for sure, at least a master's, right? And education is right up there. Education is right up there. When I got my MBA, my parents were heartbroken I wasn't a physician, and they said, well, at least you have to study more. And I said, okay, I mean, it really was not sufficient. So there's a lot of focus on education, and that's kind of central, regardless of whether it's a boy or a girl, whether you're going to work or not, none of that matters, right? So the process is when a girl finishes her college degree, her master's, when she's about 22, 23 years old, the girl's parents realize that she's ready for marriage. So I'm just going to take examples from this crowd. I just hope you all don't mind. So this is just random, So let's see, Carrie here has a daughter who's 22 years old, and she's looking for a groom for her child. So she goes to Laura here and says, Laura, do you know a boy, any family, we're like this, and then Laura knows Carrie. She knows how religious they are. She knows, economically speaking, how well off their family is. You have a certain idea of your social status in society. So Laura is like, let me see, let me think. And then Laura can't think of anybody in her family, but Laura thinks that there is somebody probably in Elaine's family that's perfect for her. But Elaine doesn't know Carrie. So what does Laura do? Laura, connects Elaine to Carrie and says, maybe this is a good fit. And so sometimes it's just a word of mouth, it's your social network. Sometimes, your brother-in-law's brother-in-law has a son that is perfect for your child. So that's how they identify, and you keep your antenna up, to make sure that you know who is eligible in your social circle. Now, once you identify the family, the boy's parents and the boy, you call Carrie and say, okay, Carrie, your daughter, we're going to come over to see her. And so what they do is the boy, his parents, go over 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the evening, they go over to Carrie's house, and no, they don't see the daughter right away. So it's Carrie and her husband, John, they both are sitting there, and, they are talking. And then at an appropriate time, Carrie would say, shall I bring my daughter out? And at that time, the daughter dressed exactly the way that I'm dressed now, except that her hair might not be open because that's not considered auspicious. To leave your hair open. So she would probably tie her hair, and she would walk in a little coy, and she would sit down gracefully, elegantly, and they would ask her questions. Do you know how to cook? That's the first question that they ask her. And then they ask her, what do you do for fun? What do you like to do for fun? And she answers. And they say, how many languages do you speak? Then they might ask her, do you pray every day? They ask her all kinds of questions, just trying to get her to talk. And then, if they are extremely liberal, they will allow the groom to speak to the bride in private. But if they can't go out for a coffee or anything, no, God forbid. They can, step out into the balcony or something, and they can have a conversation there. It can last 20 minutes, it can go on for 45 minutes, it can go on for an hour, and then they come back out, and the groom's family leaves, and they say, we'll let you know. Sometimes, right then and there, if the groom looks at his mom and says, I like her, they will turn around and say, we're fixing this wedding right now. Wow. And it's a done deal. And otherwise, they go back home, they talk amongst themselves. Most likely, later that night or the following morning, Carrie gets a call. Her daughter cannot take the call. Carrie or her husband will, and they'll say, we agree to this alliance, and the wedding date is fixed. And that's that. So the whole system is based on the fact that, one, your parents know what's good for you, right? And for those of you who have adult children, let's say above the age of 21, right? When you look at another youngster, you can almost tell whether that person is good for your kid or not. You know the family, you know what your kid likes, if your kid likes to travel, is a little fussy, is hot-headed, and you know the family, and the family is solid. And life teaches us to learn to read between the lines. So we know a good family when we see one, something that's like us. And when you're giving your daughter away, and when she has to go and fit in along with the rest of them, because you're marrying the whole family, you're not marrying the guy. And when you get married and go, you almost have no authority, right? You've given up your parents' house where, you were the princess, but now you're in your in-laws' house, and you have to wake up before your mother-in-law. She has to have her coffee in her hand. She has to get her breakfast. The father-in-law's lunch needs to be fixed. If your husband has an older brother, you have to listen to his wife because she has higher authority than you. When I was growing up, my father had 5 brothers, so there were 6 couples and 6 wives. Wow. And all 23 of us were raised in the same house.
Wow, a big house.
And which meant that none of us kids ever had a room to ourselves. We all slept in the living room. And it was fun because we were kids, we did our homeworks, we spread out our little mattresses, and we kind of bonded in unusual ways, in ways that perhaps cousins normally don't bond, because you grow up with 4 or 5 sets of parents, and you have that kind of a family bonding. So if you said, oh, it's just family, come over, you're saying essentially about 70 people. and that's insane, and that's also very intimidating when you're new. So when my brother got married, obviously his wife's gonna freak out. She comes in, she doesn't know any of the 70 people. She's supposed to make everybody happy, right? Wow. And so that's about roughly the way that the arranged marriage system works. Now, sometimes if parents can't find somebody through the community, you can actually put out an ad in the newspaper in the matrimonial column. And then you will get resumes and photographs. These days, there are websites, there are tons of social media sites that help you with that, but you can then take a look at and filter out, the guys whose profiles you don't like, whose photographs you don't like. Please come on in. Whose profiles you don't like and whose photographs you don't like. Now, this is how the system is, right? What is amazing is this. I am a very social person. Many of you know I've worked here and there. I still have an organization that handles my Asian clients. I have an extremely wide network of just family, friends, associates. I know only 2 couples in India who are divorced. Only 2. The others, 2 or 3 that I know who are of Indian heritage are actually here. They're not there. India has a divorce rate that's less than 4%, right? And if you look at the Indian community here, the average median income for an American family is at $75,000, $76,000 a year. Indians come in at $116,000 a year, and that's the average. We are by far the richest ethnicity, of all the communities that exist here in the United States. Mm-hmm. So something is working, right? We're living comfortable lives, and we are, making our marriages work. Our children feel secure. We're extremely involved with our kids, just like every other parent here, I assume, right? There is a whole another level, though, of the extended family that's also involved. So my cousins, for example, would constantly check on my daughter, who's a junior at NYU right now in Manhattan. So she'd be getting messages from them, what's happening, why are you late, what are you doing? And so they're answering, because they have 5 other mothers in the family, and they are equally answerable to everybody. So it's a community really that truly raises a child. And that's how I think arranged marriages have worked historically. Coming to my story, it was the day after Christmas of 1997, and my husband came home with his parents to see the girl. By that time, I finished my MBA, I was working for a Dutch company, I had my own credit card, I had my own friends. I knew that I could never fall in love. I was not allowed to fall in love, and I wasn't allowed to date. I also wasn't allowed to do lots of other things that I think many of you perhaps would have taken for granted. You could cut your hair, you could wear makeup, you could dress the way that you all liked. The boldest thing that I think I've done is I've lied and gone to a discotheque.
You go, girl.
I have. And it was that time, right?
Disco ball.
Yes, before I got married. Before I got married, I would do little things, and I had an older brother, so I grew up with guys around me. I had guys for friends, but I know that there was no possibility, because my parents wouldn't accept it, and it was not societal norm. So if you had crushes, you better not. That was that, and you couldn't express it, and you didn't even make any mistakes, right? Because you learn from those mistakes. Those are vital mistakes to make between the ages of 16 and 21, 22, because they shape your adult personality and choices, and you learn about consequences of your choices. I didn't have any of that. My husband came home with his mother and father. I was given the same 45 minutes to talk, but he was not the first one. What I did tell my father, he was very particular about my education. He was very particular that I learned to speak English correctly. My grammar, my vocabulary, I owe it to him, no doubt. But he was so strict, and our home was very conservative. It was based in faith. And as a young girl, there was only so many things that I was allowed to do. I couldn't stay out late night. I couldn't wear pants. Never wore pants till after I got married. I got married at 25, right? And so when I think back, there was this 50-minute conversation that my husband and I, Shri is his name, Shri and I had. And at the end of that 50 minutes, we asked that the family give us a couple of weeks before we made up our minds. But they said that was going to be too much. And so when he went back, he said yes to his parents called my parents, and after that 45-minute talk, it was a done deal. I saw him for those 45 minutes on December 26th, and I saw him next, the day before our wedding, at the venue.
Wow.
And that was only the second time that I was seeing him. And in between, we weren't allowed to, we couldn't meet because he was here and I was in India. We couldn't talk a lot because offshore calling then was not as cheap as it is today. So there was no phone calls that we could talk. Email was even harder because I did not have access to an email, though he did, because he lived here and had a laptop even then. And email is a poor way to build a relationship with your fiance. Mm-hmm. Really, bad mode of communication. But so then here's what happened. We got married on April 29th. 2 days after my wedding, I was on a flight. And 3 things were strange about that flight. 1, I'd never flown before. 2, I was coming to the US and I knew very little about this place. 3, it was he and me, no one else. And that kind of gave me knots in my stomach because you really didn't know who you were going with. Now, my husband has a brother who surprised him and said that you're not going to go directly to the US. The family is gifting you guys a honeymoon. You're going to make a stop in Switzerland. So I landed up in Switzerland with this guy that I don't really know, but I'm married. And we only had 4 days there, but we kind of tiptoed around each other. We were being formal and nice and saying please and thank you and trying to not get, we couldn't have a pillow fight. No, you couldn't. You obviously couldn't. Though he was someone that you were married to, it was too much. It was too liberal or too friendly because you didn't have that level of familiarity. Now, you know what happens when you live on the other side of the world? You're watching American movies like Pretty Woman, movies of that time, right? and then you're looking at all of these tall buildings and downtown images. They always show you Chicago and New York. Right. They're not showing you Rochester Hills, Michigan. Right? So I come, and the man has a 1-bedroom apartment in Rochester Hills, Michigan. I know there's so much of talk about illegal immigration. I was a legal immigrant. I came here on a spouse visa. And on a spouse visa, you can do absolutely nothing. You can't take courses, you cannot work, you cannot drive. There is nothing you can do except be a spouse. That is what a spouse visa is for. So when I first came here, all of a sudden, I didn't know the man I was living with. I didn't know a soul in Detroit. I didn't know another lady, another guy. There was no social media. I was in a country that I did not understand. I couldn't drive here because, of course, we drive on the wrong side of the road. I couldn't drive here, and there was nothing that I could do, really. And my husband would wake up and go away to work at 6:15 in the morning. I switch on the television. I could not understand the ads that used to play because they were all medical ads and insurance ads, and that wasn't what I was exposed to. And I tried to follow some soaps and that didn't work, but I did watch a ridiculous amount of America's Funniest Videos. I I did. Bob said, you remember that guy?
Yes.
Yeah. And when I would turn channels, I would say, the English sounds really different. And then my husband told me about the Southern accent. And I found it very, very sweet. I swear to God, I would play country music for at least 5 hours a day with the closed captioning on, just so I could learn the Texan accent. And that's how I learned. That's how I learned. But you know, one thing that I could do on a spouse visa is go sit in a public library. But since I couldn't drive, my husband would drop me there at the Rochester Public Library at 7 a.m. and not pick me up till 4. Wow. And they had these VHS tapes there that allowed me to see they don't have great movies, guys. I'm watching like Escape from Sobibor, Bridge over River Kwai. I'm watching all these movies. I'm trying to make sense of it. I've never seen an American mall. I'm trying to find out, you know, when you travel, you can't really tell the currency and how much is really expensive. So I couldn't tell the difference between dollars and cents. And I had a $50 bill because I didn't have a credit card, and I go to a Dunkin' Donuts, and I said, how much is the donut? She says 98 cents, and I told her, I said, I can't afford it, I only have $50. and I didn't know, and that's really where I started. And the other thing that I could do is I could walk on the streets, I could jog all I wanted, which I did every single morning diligently. Everybody would say good morning. Hi, how are you? And I would hope that somebody would stop and just talk to me for 2 minutes. And nobody did. Nobody did. I didn't know a single soul, but here's what I knew. I knew that I'm going to learn, that I'm going to contribute stuff, and to make it even more difficult for me, the first year of marriage was the hardest because I discovered how different my husband and I were. You know, he didn't like Chinese food. I loved it. He watched only war movies. I was done with that at the Rochester Public Hills Library. There was almost nothing. His friends were different from my friends. My friends, you know, they stole wine and had vodka, and we sneaked out and we went to discotheques, and we, you know, used to look at, we used to ogle literally at magazines with the Chicago Bulls and dream of Dennis Rodman. We used to do the craziest things. But Shree's friends were so together and focused, and engineers, and focused on saving money and investing, and they were so grown up. And I was only 25, and I did not know how to grow up so fast. I did not know how to wake up at 5 a.m., pack his lunch, stand at the door, and say, bye, honey, see you in the evening. And I couldn't do that, but I did learn how to do that pretty fast. Within 4 months, I did get a driver's license. My life became a little bit easier from then on. I started working, but that first year of marriage, I almost knew, I had a feeling in my stomach that this was not gonna work. And he was unhappy, and I was unhappy because we didn't know what we had. I mean, we didn't know each other at all. But as we went through the first year, gradually, we gave it time, we watered the plant, we cut each other some slack, we started to discover the nicer things about each other. And I would say we made a conscious decision to not have kids for the first 5 years. I wanted to go study more to make my parents happy, and MBA wasn't enough. I went back to Michigan State, got my master's in public relations. Fast forward, by 2007, I was the Vice President of Corporate Communications for North America for a firm in Detroit that was conducting news conferences, managing communications with legislative offices, talking to lobbyists, working with Native American groups, Hispanic groups, learned all of that, and it was, I think, my decade of growth. Not professional growth, personal growth. Growth where I felt like I could actually build a life and have a sense of identity. And everybody here, you know, who's had a coffee with me, I know there are several here of you that I've had coffees with, that's what I did when I moved to Austin. I built relationships, one by one. Because now I stand in a community that has given me everything that I have, in a country that has given me everything that I am. Not everything that I have, everything that I am. And it's my turn to give back. And I try to do so in my own little way every single day. So really, that's that. 3 lessons. 3 lessons that I've learned. 3 lessons that I've learned. I think it doesn't really matter how you meet your husband. The challenges are the same. The crazy mother-in-laws, the crazy sister-in-laws, the power struggles, the messy men, the insensitive comments, the situations getting out of hand, kids going through cycles, money problems, messy homes, unfulfilled desires. I think it's a given. It's a given, right? It doesn't matter how it is, because the 2 divorces that I know of that happened to my friends or family in India, both of them had marriages just like most of yours. They dated, fell in love, got married, blah, blah, blah. And those were the marriages that fell apart, right? The second lesson that I learned is it teaches you how to focus on what's important. I told you I got 45 minutes to make up my mind after talking to this man. When you get 45 minutes to talk to a guy and you have to say yes or no at the end, you kind of focus on what's important. You're not looking at broad shoulders and hair. No. You are focusing, your list of questions is, your time starts now. How are you with money? Would you want a wife who loves to be a career woman? Would you be supportive? Are you close to your mother? Do you come from a close-knit family? Do you clean up after yourself? Do you know how to cook? You're asking questions about daily life, and you're trying to focus on what's important. The question that made me say yes was this. My hair was always braided. It was oiled and braided because that's how girls wore their hair back then. And I always wanted to leave my hair open and be a rebel.
That's a girl.
I did. So I asked my husband, I said, can I cut my hair? Will you allow me to cut my hair? And he said, I don't understand your question. It's your hair, isn't it?
Oh. Yes! Go Shree!
And my condition was the boy's family will not get a cent. You marry me for what I am. My father given you diddly squat.
Wow. Nice.
And Shree's parents and Shree did not want a cent.
Oh, nice.
Yes, they said all we want was the girl. So those were the 2 reasons that I said yes. So it taught me to focus on what's important. And there's a saying, guys, and this is the last piece of learning that I had is, there are sages who go on top of mountains to meditate. And you can go up to the sage and say, what did you find on top of that mountain? And the sage says, I found what I took with me. And I think that's how a marriage is. You get back what you carry within you. So investing in yourself, building what they call courage, flexibility, humility, a little bit of strength, being able to function in what I call the moderate zone, where you're not over the top happy and too sad and crappy, can't get out of bed. When you're functioning in the moderate zone, all of those things is what I think helps me. But for me to be able to tell this story today here, wearing a sari, and not be judged, and to be accepted, and to be loved by so many of you, I am so fortunate to be here. I thank you all, and happy to take any questions.
So you said that he said yes,
Yes.
after you met with him for the 45, 50 minutes.
Yes.
Could you have said no?
Yes, I did. I said no to a few other guys who had come before that to see me.
Oh.
I did say no. And my parents gave me, especially my father, he said, until you say yes, you would not have to marry him.
Okay.
Which is why you're allowed those 45 minutes. The reason that I said no for a couple of other guys is one of the other guy's mother, she came, and because I told you how they have more authority, she put her foot up on the couch and she sat. Like for the first time, she's coming to my house and she like puts her feet up and she's like, yeah, so what you got on here, you know? And I'm like, out. The second person was so money-minded. Oh, my father's house has the most beautiful curtains. And that when the family came in, they looked at their questions were, how much does the marble cost per square foot? How much are the curtains per square meter? Where did you get them? What property? Oh, we have tea estates here. And I'm like, not a good fit. And so those were the two that I said no to. Yes.
You have 2 daughters.
Yes.
Will you all do an arranged marriage?
I hope so. I will definitely not, Megan. I have not raised them the way that I had been raised. They live in another time. And I hope that they have their crushes and they find the loves of their lives. And she's in Manhattan, the other one's here in Austin. She comes back and she says, oh, mommy's so cute. And I'm like, yes. And I'm so happy that they can come back and tell me that. I can't wait for them to date, to find and be in a marriage where they're the ones saying I do and everybody else isn't going, they do. Yes.
Is it still pretty common practice today? And does it typically have anything to do with, is it mostly wealthier families or is it really all families?
It's all families. It's still common today. What's changed is once the wedding is fixed, then they see each other a whole lot more.
Okay.
So at least there's a lot more familiarity because for us it was boom and then the venue, which is crazy. But these days you do have those fillers.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So I want to know, when did you fall in love with your husband?
So that is a very nice question. That is, yes, of course, there's no doubt, because I think that's what you're trying to figure out. You're not marrying the person you love, you're marrying the person you think you can love, right? And that's the best call you can make. And I think I fell in love with him when I came here in May. By September, I was working because I switched to a work visa. And I wanted to quit that job and I wanted to go back and study communication and PR, and that's where my heart was. And he said, you've got to do that for yourself. And he would drive the distance from San Antonio to, I would say, Leander every day to work, just so I could go to school. And he would clean the house. He was extremely, I would say a partner in the true sense of the word, and he just lacked that streak that made him want to control me. No, he allowed me to be myself. And I'm a type A person, and I'm a public speaker, and I work, and I'm out there, and I know a crazy number of men. And not once has he said, let me check your phone. Not once. It hasn't even crossed his mind. So when I think I learned from him what faith was, what supporting another person is, and I was too busy doing things for myself to look anywhere else. And so I think over the years, and anybody here who's been married for many decades, I know Elaine has been, that the relationship changes every decade, right? The dynamics change. And a mentor of mine told me that, do you know when a marriage is successful? It's not when your kids are happy and healthy and rich and none of that. And she said that a marriage is successful when you care for the same people in the same way. So you both are one. It doesn't matter if it's his brother or yours, his friend or yours. Everybody matters, and that's when your circle is really strong. So I think, that's where my husband and I are today.
That's beautiful.